Hello, my name is Josh, and I'm a watchaholic. Welcome to Horology Insanity.
What is up, my watch friends? So, check this out. Today, we are looking at this beauty. This is the Visitor Linden. Now, before I get into this, I'm already looking at it. It's dust. It's dust. And that's going to be the first thing I'm going to talk about, actually, because this dial is absolutely fantastic. But y'all know that I just can't keep dust off of stuff. I just can't. Like, part of me is thinking about making an actual, like, dust-free room studio, like, in my house, so that I can just not have dust on everything. But that's a little extreme, some might say. And so, but in this case here, this beautiful black watch, it's fantastic, except for when you get a speck of dust on it. So anyway, let me also get these hands moved out of the way so that we can kind of see what I want to talk about here in a second. All right. So with that, this is the Visitor Linden. And the first thing to note, there are 4 variants of this watch. There's the white one that they call a snowfall, and it currently says sold out. I don't know if they're going to make more of those or not. And I think Random Rob had a white one and did a video on that because he loves white dial watches. So check that out, and I'll try to link to it down in the description. But the others, that one sold out. The others are still available, though. There is this one, which is the black dial, which they call Midnight. And it's kind of dark black, so I get that, like pitch black. Or as I called in the Oris Diver 65 video that I did, it is inky black, like it's ink jet black, which I dig. But there's also a blue one that they call the Larkspur. At least I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Larkspur, and that is a blue dial variant. And then there's this other one that I don't necessarily know how to pronounce, and I really don't even know what color it is. But I think it's pronounced Amaranth, and it is a somewhat matte, orangish, brownish, maybe on the hue of red spectrum. Honestly, the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it was the color mauve, which, depending on what your grandma's curtains or couch looked like back in the day, you may have weird flashback memories of the color mauve. But I dig it. And in fact, of all the 4 variants, despite thoroughly enjoying this black one, if I were to get one of these for my collection, I think I would go with that mauve. Or technically they call it amaranth, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But no, that mauve color, that amaranth color, it's such a unique color that I don't have anything in my collection like that. And so I've got tons of black and white and blue dial watches, but that mauve one is standing out to me. So, like all good watch addicts do, I'm now sitting on that, contemplating whether or not I'm going to add one of these into my collection or not. But I do have to say a huge thank you to Phil and the people at Visitor, because they're letting several of us channels borrow this watch so that we can kind of check it out and then do videos on them. And I got lucky enough to be able to borrow it. So with that, I got to get it back in the mail on to the next person, or maybe back to Phil, I think. But let's just talk about the watch real quick. Let me talk about my experience with it, and then we can talk about the specs briefly again in my Not a Review segment. In fact, let's start out with that. Let's get the review stuff out of the way. It's a 39mm case width from left to left here. Now, with the dial being the size that it is because it's a dress watch, and because this kind of fixed bezel is so small and sleek, I think that it actually wears closer to a 40. And a lot of dress watches like this wear that way. I think a lot of these dress watches, because of the dial presence, it's kind of like opening up. This dial, compared to a bunch of divers, it really does look larger. And so I don't mind that. I actually enjoyed wearing this. Y'all know I have an 8-inch wrist. And so, but even for me, I never once felt like the 39 was small. I never once felt that. And so that's pretty cool. The overall lug width is 48.5, which also helps with the overall size. Now, for some of you, that might be a con, because if you have smaller wrists, you might appreciate a smaller lug to lug, down around 46 or so mil. But 48 lug to lug, you can see that the lugs have this pretty sweet design and taper, and I'll show you that a little bit more too when we look at the buckle. So that also helps with the overall presence. Like, this isn't a small watch, in my opinion, and I can appreciate that. I personally really liked that about this, and so yeah, that's just me. It is 10.5 millimeters thick, and it's got the Miyota movement in it. We'll talk about that in a second, but I don't think the camera is doing justice to just how thin this watch actually is. And y'all know that I sometimes will talk about how the case shape and design, how they can do the case lugs kind of midway up so that the under part tucks into your wrist to make it look or seem thinner on wrist than it actually is. But in this case, they're not doing that, and it really just is this thin. And so y'all know I love thin watches. The thinner the better, in my opinion. And so that's a win. And yeah, you really can't appreciate just how thin it is, I don't think, on the camera. But it's nice. It's sleek is what I would call it. With that, they have 20 millimeter lugs. So it comes with these nice leather straps, and you might want to wear it on that leather. Like, these are good and they would last a long time. It does come with the curved the curved spring bars, and I really appreciate curved spring bars, especially on something that just has this beautiful of an overall aesthetic. That curve right here, kind of hugging the contour of the case shape, I think that's really good. Now, if I wanted to be super nitpicky, and y'all can kind of see through there, there's a little bit of a gap, and a lot of watches that have curved spring bars tuck in a little bit tighter to the case. So let me see if I can get an example. Here, I just happen to have this sitting here because I'm about to send it to a buddy. But you see here, there's a little bit of gap, but it's not quite as pronounced here, right? It's a little bit tighter to the case shape. Let me get my Murph again too. So this, I'm pretty sure, is curved spring bars. Again, a little bit of a gap, but not quite what the Linden has. So that, all that means is that they just they drilled the lug holes, which they do have drilled lugs. You can see that on the case, which on a dress watch, I don't know if I love that. In general, I don't like drilled lugs. So maybe that's just a personal opinion. But it just means that they drilled them a little further out than further in, and that gives you that gap. But anyway, that aside, you could totally put straight and spring bars in here, and that would fill it up. Or if you wanted to go the bracelet route, 20 mil is such a common standard for all of these that you'd have no problem finding other options if you wanted to. A part of me thought about like a 20 mil beads of rice bracelet, maybe. I think that might have looked cool on this, but again, I'm also a fan of beads of rice, and I think with the overall kind of bubbliness of the aesthetic that they have here with these teardrop indices and the hour hand, I don't know, I think the beads of rice might suit it well. So anyway, the watches all come on a leather, and you can pick. They've got a bunch of different leather straps. So they included a couple other ones here, so I'll show you those. This is a green one. Of course, the one that's on it is just standard black. They included this green one for us to check out. They included, this is kind of a brown wine color, not quite burgundy, but it's pretty nice. And so I played with all of these, and here's what's interesting. Now we're going to get into a little bit of my experience with the watch. I found out that my favorite strap pairing with this watch was actually this white Barton Elite silicone. And so you'll see I wear this on my Mako V3 Frost, which it's specifically the one with the blue accent, and it works great. Somebody in the Zelos Timekeeper group recommended it, and so I got this, and I've been loving it ever since. But it's got the white outer portion, the black inner portion, and then I got it with the black buckle. But when I put this on the Linden, it made the black in the dial seem all the more darker black, but at the same time, it made the hands and indices really jump off the dial. And so, yeah, the time that I was wearing it and experiencing it, I actually had it on this white strap and I loved it. Now, here's the only thing I'll say about this particular white strap. While it worked and it had a good visual aesthetic and whatnot, it's a little weird maybe to have a sporty strap like this on a kind of dressy style watch. And so I use this kind of as an experiment to see if I would like it or not. If I were to get this black Visitor, which again, I want them all, but if I were to get this one, I would actually see if I could get a white leather strap, as bright a white as I could get. I mean, that silicone strap is bright, and maybe get it with black stitching. So I'd get white on there, black stitching on leather, which would keep the overall dress aesthetic going. And I think that would look brilliant. So that's my recommendation to anybody who has this. But again, only if you kind of like the black and the white. I know a lot of people would probably keep it on something simpler like this, just so that it's not jumping off the wrist as much. But I actually liked it jumping off the wrist. And that was kind of what I wanted. And it worked out well with that white strap. All right, so back to the watch. Let's see here. We've talked about everything: sapphire, AR coating, normal. It does have the Miyota 9015 movement, and it comes with a custom rotor, and it comes with a custom date wheel, which we're going to talk about later on towards the end of the video. But I like what they've got going on here. The Miyota, as we know, is a little bit of a thinner movement, and so they've utilized it to get this 10.5 millimeter height, which I adore. They've given you a reasonably sized see-through case back on the back here so that you can check it out, even though the rotor kind of covers it up. That's the drawback with the rotor. But you can see that the overall, let me see if I can zoom in here. The overall design and just decoration of it, it's a good looking watch with a good enough looking movement, right? And so you can see that there. The cool thing is that the Miyota is one of those kind of trusted and reliable movements, and so that's really a good thing when you're checking this one out. You know, I want to say that, and maybe this is because of the shortage of the ETA or Solita movements, that kind of stuff. Maybe even STP is trying to come in and fill that void in the market. But a lot of microbrands now are going to the Miyota 9000 series movement. And I don't know, I don't mind it so much. I've not done like a side-by-side comparison or really went nerding out into comparing them, but I don't mind them. And at the price, it's not that bad. I think these are $580 USD. 580. And so at that price, the finishing and the overall like feel of the watch, this thing feels like a more expensive watch. I would put this up in the same category that I would like the Zelos Horizons GMT, which does come with the ETA movement and is a little bit more expensive because of that. But the overall fit and finish and everything like that, especially when you get into this dial and you get into these textures. Let me see if I can get this going right here. Especially on like this, these hands. Look at how intricate some of these are. That little cutout there, just shy of the tip. The loom pip, both in the main center of the hand, but on the outer part. You can see here the cut on the minute hand, which reaches all the way out to the minute track on the edge. I mean, the overall design of this really speaks to a more expensive watch, in my opinion. It gives it that feel. Now, I'm going to say one con. I don't love the date wheel. I love the fact that it's a custom date wheel. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think I'm becoming the mindset, or coming to the mindset, or the opinion of maybe that as much as I like dates and the functionality that they give on watches and sports watches, tool watches, etc., I don't think I like them on most dress watches. And on something as visually beautiful as I think this watch is, I think the date looks bad. I think it makes it look cheaper or maybe a little tackier. And that's saying that I like all the playfulness. A lot of people will look at this and they won't like the overall artistic styling, and they might say that it's ugly because of that. I do not think that. I don't find this watch ugly at all. I find it beautiful. But I find the date to be an ugly thing on it. So that's just my opinion. I wish that they would have not had the date, and I wish that they would have moved the Visitor down to be even with the 3 o'clock right here. And I think that would have been cool. And we'll go ahead and do a spoiler alert. The cool thing about this loom, or the date wheel, is that it's loomed. And so we'll do a quick loom shot. But I wish that maybe they had removed the date and maybe loomed the Visitor logo, right? That would have been cool, in my opinion. But let's do this. Let's give it a quick loom shot. And you will see that it is using BGW9 Blue Loom, which I adore. And you can see that, oh, the Visitor is loomed. Look at there. So that is a surprise that I didn't even notice while I was experiencing this watch. So the Visitor, the 5, you can see those stand off. You can see the tiny little pip on the end of the hour hand, right? I think that's pretty cool. But the loom, it really does glow great. It looks as good in person as you're seeing on the camera. And y'all know that I love blue. You know, blue in general is not as bright as some of the green loom that you might see, but I think it's better, and I think it's bright enough to do the job. So for me, it not being quite as bright as you could get is worth it to have the soothing effect that the visual blue gives you. That's just my opinion. All right, so with that, let's turn this back on now, and let's finish this out. I think that's pretty much all I want to cover with the watch. The only other thing I want to talk about is the case design, or the clasp. This is pretty neat here. You'll notice that they've contoured the shape of the buckle to match the contour of the case and lugs right here. And it's a playful thing that you don't really notice a lot. When it's on wrist, you know, you don't really notice the buckle as much. But again, it's that attention to detail that you see throughout the whole watch that I think makes this such a great watch. I do. I think that it's that attention to detail that makes it seem like it might be a higher valued watch. It might be a higher, like it's, I don't know. When I sit here and hold this watch, I feel like it's an $800 to $1,000 watch, and it's not. And partially because of that is because of the movement, but the overall fit and finish is that good, I think. So good on you, Visitor, for doing that. I hope all of your other ones continue in that trend and that attention to detail, because I think it will only lead to more success for you. And yeah, with that, we'll close this one out. If there's anything I didn't cover and you're curious about, drop it down in the comment section and let me know what you think. Like, is this watch too much for you? I dig it. I absolutely dig it. Y'all know that I dig some weird and funky watches, though. I've got this Feynman one back here that I adore, right? Well, you can see up here, I got my Zurich, my Balticus, but even with the dress category right here, right? I've got that Feynman that I really like. And so, yeah, I really like the overall aesthetic of this. And like I said, I'm kind of eyeing that mauve or amaranth one. But yeah, what do you think? If you were to only have one dress watch in your collection, would you want it to be something kind of artistic like this? Or would you want it to be maybe more classic and traditional? Yeah, let me know what you think. Cool. All right, my friends, until we talk again, please remember what really matters. And that's not watches. Keep the insanity sane.